Hi, for most of you, you know who I am. I'm Randy Logan, and this is kind of a story of a guy who thought he knew who was in control. In my earlier life, I grew up as an Air Force brat. That means from the time I was 3, 4 years old all the way until I was in my 19 years old, we traveled from Air Force Base to Air Force Base and whatnot. So that gives you a little bit of story about my total youth. About the age of 8 or 9, my dad, who I thought was my real dad, approached me and let me know that I was adopted. As you can imagine, it was a real shock. I felt like there was a loss of not belonging, a loss of love, and I really didn't know how to handle it. And so those years afterwards were filled with sports, any kind of activity I could do to keep my mind off of my situation. I got into baseball, football, hockey, whatever I could do to keep my mind away from what had been told to me. In my early teenage years, we were stationed overseas on Guam, and I was involved in the church as far as a junior ministry, and I became a junior porter. And what it was is when there were special events, I would help with the offerings and whatnot. And this particular incident, Billy Graham crusades were being shown at the Air Force Base chapel nightly for about a week or two. And that's where I first became aware that God was real. I'm going, why are all these people walking down to this evangelist? I had no idea. So after that, my life was trying to figure out what my purpose was. What was I doing here? And understanding my personal situation in terms of going to one school after another. I ended up going to 12 schools in my adolescence and probably about 8 or 9 different Air Force bases. At the age of 19, I met this gal whom I thought I loved. I didn't really know what love was, but I thought I did. I married her and we had a daughter. I thought, wow, this is pretty cool. And in the meantime, my stepfather had passed away, and that just brought up things of the past. And so as time went on, my first wife and I, we just started having problems. And eventually I ended up being a divorced father with a daughter. I didn't know how to handle that. And the relationship between my daughter and I became strained. I tried to do everything I could to show her that I loved her. I participated in all her school events and her social events, but there was always something lacking. And come to find out later in life, there wasn't always the straight story told from her mother's side of view. I'm not here to bash her because, believe me, I was just as much to blame for the divorce. After that, I kind of had a party life. I hate to admit it, but I wasn't a very good guy. I got involved with alcohol and drugs, more on the experimental side. I was a pothead, but I never got involved with the hard stuff. I think the reason it was is God had his hand on me. I didn't realize it at the time. I had a cousin that was dating a guy that came home from Vietnam and exposed her to various drugs, and it fried her brain. So it kind of scared me. So to this day, I think it was probably God. But so it kind of limited my reactions to drugs and alcohol. The problem is, I didn't know how to handle life. I eventually found another woman who I thought I loved. I mean, this was totally different than the last one. So I thought, this has got to be it. Wrong. Another divorce. The problem was I was looking for love in the wrong places. You've heard that song, but it's really true. I didn't realize it till later, but if you don't have God in your marriage, you're probably doomed for failure. You know, these women were all pretty decent. They're nice people, but we all had our own baggage. So our lives were always in chaos. I could never figure it out. I tried my best. I always thought I was a good person. Always felt like there was something watching over me. I always felt lucky. I didn't realize what was going on. I really was going through life without paying attention. And I had no understanding or what was going on in my life. You know, I always thought it was just the hurt of my youth. But after the drugs and the partying and the women and stuff, I just one day was looking out the back of my backyard at the San Gabriel Valley, which is a nice view, wondering there had to be more in life than what I'm living. You know, there was always something missing, and I had no clue what it was. I had good jobs. I had jobs in sales and construction. So I wasn't like destitute or anything. I wasn't needing money or anything. I had things, but the things never seemed to fill the heart, if you will. I owned different homes. I did different things and went and did things as I wanted, but there was still that chaos. It was never violence. It was just we didn't have any sense of going forward in life. We didn't have any sense of saving or doing things that we should be doing. We were all good people, but it was terrible. I eventually became a liquor salesman, and I kind of realized that probably wasn't a good route to go, because I had a problem with alcohol, and being a liquor salesman I thought would be a great job, but it turned out it's probably the worst job I ever had. I was noticing that other salespeople around me were dying off. They'd turn yellow and wouldn't come to work. Find out they died. So I was starting to get the idea that I didn't really want to be a liquor salesman, but I stayed with it for a while. One day I walked into the Port Mar, which is in Downey. I don't even know if it's there anymore, but it was a dinner house bar, and it was my account. I would go into the bar and wait for a liquor order. One day this gal walked in from the dinner house side and was taking the tab up for her customers to get the check paid, and I met her. I went, wow, this gal's different. I didn't know her, and eventually, after a period of time, I would talk to her, and I invited her out to breakfast. I didn't know she was married, and I wasn't married at the time, so why not ask her out to breakfast? Went to breakfast, and at breakfast I found out she was going through a divorce. She had 2 boys, and kind of a tough family that might not receive me well. So time went on, and finally I decided to see if we could have a relationship, but there's a difference here. She loved God. And at the time, I really didn't know what that meant. Excuse me. So she invited me to church. You guessed it, it was community chapel. After the service, she asked me what I think, and I go, what kind of church is this place? I'd never seen people raise their hands, and I think there was a couple people, if I remember correctly, dancing in the aisleway. And I said, wow, what did you bring me to? So she let it slide. A couple of weeks went by, and I talked to her while she came in to get her receipt taken care of. I said, you know, I think I'd like to try that church again. So we did. We went to the church, and afterwards she asked me about my thoughts, and I told her, I think I might be able to do this. And she said, well, you know, I'm not looking for another male. I'm looking for a man. Someone who could walk through my life with God and raise up a family. So I took the challenge. I met with Pastor Mallet. We all know where that's going. She took me right up to the front of the sanctuary. Honey, raise your hands, lift out your hands. And before I knew it, I was on the floor. I had no idea what happened to me. And that was kind of my introduction to what the Holy Spirit was all about. I couldn't even get up when I opened my eyes. I was just, you might say I was drunk in the Spirit, not naturally, but in the Spirit. And I didn't even know what that meant. So that was the beginning of my walk with the Lord. Our relationship started out where it was nothing like I experienced. And I'm talking about God and Debbie. You know, I really had no experience about God. And here's this gal, I had no idea that there was anything like that. So I started this courtship, and that was totally different. We did it very slowly and methodically, where we became friends, okay? Dating was nothing physical. It was strictly dating, and that was totally different for me. Eventually, I met her family and the boys, and I thought, this has to be love. I mean, I got through the part where she said I wouldn't be able to handle her family, and they were a bunch of characters. And but I was willing to start this situation. So I started dating Debbie in January, and that following October we got married. And let me tell you what, that's kind of a whirlwind if you think about it. But I know it was the Lord, because he was in every step of the way. I mean, he allowed certain things to happen, so divorces would be final, houses would be sold, whatnot, and we could start a clean thing. The one thing that I'd like to say that, you know, just because we had the Lord in our life doesn't mean there wasn't going to be problems. I had this ill-conceived idea that once you had the Lord in your life, things would be kind of hunky-dory. Boy, was I wrong. You know, you think you take one step towards the Lord, and man, the enemy is going to step right back in front of you. I had no idea about that. So after a couple years of being in the church, Debbie and I were wanting to buy a home. We couldn't find anything locally, so we made one bad decision. We moved away from the church. We got a good deal on a house. Life was good, but things were up and down. You know, chaos with the kids. You know how teenagers are. They're just being kids. And so we went through things like that. Our families interacting, bought a couple homes, went through a bankruptcy, different lawsuits with fellow buddies, and I started a business. We went through a lawsuit there. We went through some economic situations, but I gotta say, God was in control. So we got through it. And like I say, the difference in our lives is we had God in our marriage. At this point, there was a time that I hold Debbie responsible for. I didn't know anything about tithing. And I think that was one of the things that helped us also. Regardless of where we were, we either tithed at Community Chapel or some other of the televangelists we sent tithing into, but we always tried to tithe at home. We didn't always do it at Community Chapel, but we made sure we tithed. So I figured that was one of the things that helped us through life, that we were faithful to the Lord. I didn't realize it at the time, but we were just giving back what he gave to us. You know, it's awful easy to forget. You forget a paycheck, you get busy in life, and then I started worrying about, hey, Deb, did we send our tithes in? She goes, I have it covered. So I got to hand it to my wife. She's really good in that area. From the time that I became saved and became a member of this church, I got to say one thing, and I don't want it to sound like you need to be saved and born again to do good in life, but it was like God turned my life around. I started having better jobs with better pay for jobs that required higher education that I didn't have. It was like God opened this door. You're supposed to have a BS degree or a master's, and here I am doing stuff that I had no idea about it. I didn't have a chemistry background, but the Lord just worked with me in that area, and I did well. And it didn't matter if it was chemicals or construction sales or whatnot. He just opened the floodgates. So I just wanted to stipulate that you don't get involved with the Lord to have a higher paycheck, but he does take care of you. That's what I'd like to say. After that time of realizing, hey, you know, we've tried all the churches locally. We're not finding anything that comes close to Community Chapel. I don't know what we were thinking. We weren't going to find anything close. We couldn't find a place that was spiritually alive. You could tell God was there, but nobody raised their hands, nobody danced. It was a different type of atmosphere. So when we decided to come back on a regular full-time basis now, it was like when we walked in the door of Community Chapel, it was like we'd never left. Some of the faces changed, but it was family. Got a grown man crying here. You can't put a dollar amount on what that means.
That's right.
We left for what we thought was doing right to have a nice house. But that turned out to be a bad decision. So now we make an effort to come to church on Sundays. We're involved in the Bible studies on Wednesdays, and we try to be involved in any other church activities. That's not to say we still don't have problems, because we do. You know, when you get two strong-willed people, me and a strong-willed woman, you got it, my wife, you're going to have problems. You know, we come from different backgrounds, but we're both strong-willed. So one of the things that I do notice that eventually one of us shuts up, and that's God dealing with the situation. And I never had God in my other marriages. Those might have worked if I did, but they didn't. I'm thankful for where I'm at. I'm thankful for this church. I'm definitely thankful for all of you. One of the reasons I decided to do this is I noticed in the other testimonies, they had one thing in common, the love of God. And so I'd like to leave just one verse with you. You notice I didn't quote a bunch of verses. Some of you guys are really good at it. But the one I chose was, trust in the Lord with all your heart, and lean not on your own understanding. In all your ways submit unto him, and he will make your path straight.
Amen. Yes. That's it.
That's it.
Yes.
That's my testimony.